Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Polly Podcast. As always, Polly Podcast blog posts are available on pollyverse.com in the blog section. And we're also available on Spotify, YouTube, and now live streamed on Twitch at www.twitch.tv/Pollyverse if you want to interact and ask questions during the live stream, the live recording of this podcast, then go ahead and follow us on there to be notified when new streams go up. Anyway, it's been a while. So let me get into today's episode, which is the first of a series that I've been wanting to start for a long time. It's a book review, as you probably noticed from the title. And in particular, it's about the book Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. So my good friend Rhett, who's actually the first interview on Polly Podcast, he lent me his copy of Hermann Hesse's classic novel Steppenwolf. And it was just around the time that I was trying to get excited about reading again. I think that's why he lent me it, because I was talking about my favorite book, which I always talk about on here, The House of Leaves by Mark C. Danielewski, and how I want a similar book and how I want to get back into reading. And basically, Steppenwolf, it didn't disappoint. Well, it kind of did at first, but we'll get into that. So anyway, this is going to be my little review and interpretations of the book and its sort of themes and messages and what I got out of it, my thoughts and feelings kind of thing. So take this as you will, use it as a guide maybe to figure out if you want to read this book, or maybe you just think it's interesting to hear about what books are about that are annoying to read and you can't be bothered. That's fine too. Whatever floats your boat. So, to start off with, first point, I hated the novel. It took me far too long to finish it. And I'm pretty sure at the time Rhett was planning to move back to Sydney and he needed the book back. He wanted it back. So I really forced myself to get through it and to actually finish it within a certain time frame. And I'm actually pretty grateful that that was the case, because I don't know, it would have taken me a year to finish it, I think. I had this notion in my head of I had to start reading all of the classic novels. And I think it sort of came from my fascination with films as well. I love watching bad movies and getting a lot of enjoyment out of them. But I also really love watching classic films and finding out what was so great, what was so pivotal and innovative about them. And I've started to do the same with books now. And at that time, because this was a while ago now, I actually, this was probably the first real classic that I'd read. And yeah, like I'm saying, this was actually a while ago that I read this book. So it's a bit of a late review now that I'm thinking about it. But anyway, we'll proceed accordingly. Keep that in mind though. So, so Hermann Hesse's story, Steppenwolf, it actually surprised me. Even though I mostly hated it. It surprised me in a profound way. And it was probably the book that set me on that path of actually trying to read all the classics, because it was so interesting. And I try to learn something from each of them, even though a lot of them, like Steppenwolf, to me, weird and boring, but then there's always usually something very interesting or innovative to take out of it, I think. So I'm excited to talk to you about all the others too, because I read a few since then. But anyway, we'll talk about this one for now. And also I want to add as well, actually I'll talk about it later. Yeah, we're going to talk about it later. So for a book written in, I think, the 1920s, a lot of its passages and its use of language reads like something kind of brand new from a local bookstore that I could have maybe found in like a young adult modern goth section. And I don't want that to sound like a bad thing, because it's really impressive. Like in Steppenwolf, it was definitely ahead of its time. Like you can see that within the novel when you're reading it, I think. But I did really hate the portion of the book, which was, I'd say, about 80% of it, where the main character, Harry Haller, it's the Gothic sort of section where he's talking about his life. And this Harry Haller, it's surely based on Hermann Hesse himself, the double H going on there. And he's a writer, and he lives a lonely life in disdain of a bourgeois society. And he lives mostly within his own head, monologuing over his inner conflict and utter despair with the world. So he really is like an angsty teenager, and no one has ever been more depressed than him, and nothing could ever awaken within him any real lust or zest for life. And he feeds into his own detachment from society by only going out at night, looking for hypocrisies and judgments to make about his peers and the world around him. And he constantly criticizes his own faults. So that's the part of the book that I struggled to get through, that I really suffered with, because, like I said, he just keeps talking about his internal monologue and his depression. He's like, I'm so incredibly sad. And it just keeps going and going and going and going. And it's interesting, but it's like he just keeps repeating it. And I guess it is creating that feedback loop, which a lot of people have with depression. But yeah, you have to read it for yourself to see. It was hard to get through, is what I'm saying. And, it's not pleasant. It's not really pleasant to be reading about that from someone who clearly was depressed himself writing it. So for some reason, I felt like I couldn't really connect with Harry or feel that much empathy for him. But I'm thinking, maybe if you've experienced a similar kind of depression, maybe you could more. But also maybe that was the point, to see him as this pathetic Steppenwolf, half man, half lone wolf, slave to his desires in the form of drinking and detachment. I'm not really sure, to be honest, about that. This, like I said, this is my interpretation. This is the feelings that I got from it. Luckily, I don't think I've had much experience with depression in myself. I've been around a lot of other people who've had it. And yeah, as you can imagine, if you're feeling good and then reading a book like this, then there's some frustrating sections where you're just like, you can see the issues that this character Harry is having. And obviously there's nothing you can do about it, even if you want to help him, because he's a fictional character, maybe based on a real person in Hermann Hesse. And yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. It's already written. So, and obviously you're seeing his life through sort of the bird's eye view, the lens of the author, who is, talking in first person and whatnot, but you're seeing it from an outside perspective. And it can be a lot easier to sort of realize the problems, but then also realize that there's nothing you can do about it when you're in that state of mind. So anyway, it was hard to get through. So I think there is a lot to relate to within that part of the story, at least for most people. I felt myself relating to small sections of it, because I think a lot of us have experienced some sort of a period of self-doubt, or at least some kind of situational depression throughout our lives. And I think in the Steppenwolf novel, we're presented with like quite an extreme version of a somewhat relatable scenario. At least that's how I thought about it. And whether that is an honest take by the author or a mixture of exaggeration, it's hard to tell. I didn't know Hermann Hesse. I can't say. I haven't read other people's opinions about him and things like that. So I'm not really sure. This is just the pure going by the book itself. And the only book that I've read by Hermann Hesse at the moment. So although I admired the kind of gothic aesthetics of those sections of the book and the relatability to the dark thoughts, I can't lie that I did find it frustrating and cumbersome to read in many parts. And again, that may have been the exact purpose of it, to frustrate the reader with Harry's internal criticisms and kind of doomer mindset in a similar way that it also frustrates himself. That's my sort of takeaway. I don't want to make it seem like, I'm frustrated by depressed people or something. No, I mean, you can of course be frustrated by anyone, but there's nothing in particular about depressed people that frustrates me at all. Like I said, I think it makes you frustrated for Harry because he's also frustrated with himself, which is also the case in a lot of depressed people. They are aware of what, and this is from my experience through friends and partners and things like that, they will often know the problems and be unable to fix it because of, the state that they're in, the chemical imbalance and things like that. So moving on, now that I've covered my ground there, I feel better about what I said now that I gave it some context. So anyway, eventually the story picks up pace, and develops, and we're introduced to a new character. I don't know how to say this, Hermione or Hermione. I'm going to go with Hermione, like Harry Potter. And they attempt to bring Harry out of his shell and to teach him how to enjoy life, basically. Because, he's just going to bars at night, staying at home, judging everyone, not talking to anyone, not really doing much. And it takes Harry a little while to adopt, this notion to enjoy life. He's hesitant, of course. And it takes some intrigue of this character Hermione by him, as well as persistence from Hermione and himself before he's dancing with Hermione in those very same extravagant upper-class ballrooms with the people and the lifestyles that he so criticized and judged before. And now I have to add here that there are some strange parts of the novel around this section that may or may not be problematic in the modern day. I'm not quite certain myself because it was a while ago that I read it, so I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but I remember the sort of feeling that I got from it. And it's unfortunately a common occurrence in a lot of these classic novels. So basically Hermione seems to be depicted to me as an intersex character and maybe a sex worker, and they're probably perhaps fetishized by Harry, I'm thinking, like when I look back on it. And, that's especially if the character's a reflection of the author, then, there's some questions there. But anyway, like I said at the start, books like this, which involve quite a spiritual and existential theme, are very open to interpretation. So maybe someone else would think completely differently about it. I have no idea, at least for a large part. And that's especially the case with Steppenwolf. So everything that I'm saying here, like I said earlier, they're my interpretations and thoughts and feelings about the novel and its impact on me as a reader. So continuing with this section with the new character Hermione, it's where the seeds of change start to take effect. So Harry, thanks to Hermione's allure and help, slowly opens up to a new world of experiences and perception. And this leads us to the great conclusion of the novel, which is truly the great part, the really interesting part, which was profound and really really had a positive effect on me and a lot of inspiration for actually the book that I'm writing right now, which has a lot of spiritual, existential themes throughout it. So I keep losing track of where I am in my little script here. So sorry about that. Haven't done a podcast in a while, by the way. So yeah, this is the great conclusion of the novel, and it's kind of like this ultimate sequence of spiritual and psychedelic experience. Presumably, I think that Harry, he took some kind of a substance. That's how it's depicted. It seems like it's probably acid or something like that. And it was with Hermione and another friend, Pablo, the saxophonist, who I haven't really spoken about, but he seems more of a side character. Maybe there's some symbolism there, but I didn't quite pick up on it. So I think, yeah, there's definitely some similar. Now that I think back, Pablo's interested in the type of music that Harry isn't interested in. I remember that. He's a saxophonist. He plays in some sort of a orchestra in the ballroom. That's how he meets him. And he's interested in more of the cultural hits of the time, I think, in terms of music, whereas Harry's more interested in the older music, the classics himself. So yeah, that seems to be the symbolism there, is that Pablo opens his mind up to, this music that he criticized so much. So yeah, it's like I said, this section of this acid and the tripping, and the psychedelic and themes that are happening, it's done and portrayed kind of subtly at first, and it feels as if like I myself as the reader was experiencing some kind of hallucination rather than reading about someone else going through that, which is really impressive to be able to write something like that, because how are you supposed to put across those thoughts and feelings into a reader? That's awesome. So this largely went unregistered by me, but throughout the book, Harry is reading his own book, which is called Treatise on the Steppenwolf. And it's a book that was given to him by a person in the night who was holding an advertisement for a magical theatre. That's right at the start of the novel. And I think that's when he gets deeper into his internal monologue and depressive thoughts, and he starts thinking of himself as the Steppenwolf, the half man, half wolf. So in those final moments, he himself finds that magic theatre finally. And spoiler alert, okay, pause right now, stop if you don't want to hear the end of it. But 3, 2, 1, he seems to die. Okay? People seem to die. He seems to die. That seems to be what happens. So, I don't want to give away like a lot about this part of the book, because it is the best part. I really recommend it. It really deserves to be read. And also, on that note, there's also another book that I have called Siddhartha, which is another novel by Hermann Hesse, which seems to be solely focused around the spiritual themes, which what I think is his strength in writing. So I'm really interested to read that. But anyway, and it's a very small book, so I'll get through it quicker. But anyway, what I think these final themes of the novel might be, or what they might mean, because like I said, it's very open to interpretation. You're not really sure what's happening. It's kind of strange. Like, it's an unreliable narrator, of course, because he's just taken acid or something like that. I think it could be interpreted as basically Harry himself being drunken and, drug-fueled night at home alone in his room. And when I think back about this, I remember the perspective of his landlady, because he's renting a room in this house. And I'm pretty sure the landlady, or, landlord, don't have to specify lady. I think it's written as landlady. That's why I'm saying it like that. I'm pretty sure she notices Harry coming and going with some people, something like that, in his room. And then, being alone for long periods of time, and then like leaving with people, coming home drunk, stuff like that. I think that's described early on in the novel, if I remember correctly. So these characters of Hermione and Pablo, they could be real. They're probably fake, I think. They're probably exaggerations, or maybe he's imagining them completely, but I think they're at least exaggerations of people that he's met. And he's kind of invented them in his loneliness and in his, he does drink a lot in the novel. He's always going to bars at night and drinking at home, I'm pretty sure, as well. So, drunken night, fueled by drugs, inventing characters, and they join him on his trippy kind of journey. And basically what happens is they lead him through doors and rooms, which I think is not unlike Dante's very own guides in the Divine Comedy, where he delves through the depths of hell and the different layers of hell. And so I see this as getting into the layers of Harry's own subconscious, going through the doors and rooms, having him basically discover the beauty in life on one hand through Hermione and Pablo, showing him the ways of how to enjoy life, but then also showing him through another door the inevitability of his own suicide, and ultimately to be met with it. So yeah, that is my review of Steppenwolf. The first book review on Polly Podcast. And hope you've enjoyed that. A little taste of things to come. There's a few more book reviews in the works. So yeah, let me know what you think. And we've got a few more episodes lined up for the future. More lyrical reviews of my favorite songs. Also more analysis of short stories. That's a good one coming up. Things like that. So there's a few things, potentially some interviews as well. So we've got a lot going on. Also remember, now available on Twitch at twitch.tv/Pollyverse. I'll leave the links though around the description of wherever you're listening to this. So yeah, thank you for listening again. And I'll see you next time, buddy.